everyone needs help from time to time. As a blind woman, I hold the door for people who are carrying packages. But, if you ask a person if they need help, that's great. They'll take the help or they'll say no. But I've had people who are very upset because I don't take the help. And I've had people who try to encourage me to finish high school or whatever. And I have a law degree.
Welcome to the ZAMI NOBLA National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging podcast. We are your sound source for Black lesbian herstory. I'm your host, Angela Denise Davis. Our episode today features Trey Sullivan, a friend of mine who stopped by today to have a conversation with me about disability and how disability at the intersection of sexual identity, gender, and race has within it some very interesting ways of being in the world. We begin our conversation with Trey talking about how she shows up as a blind lesbian who's visually impaired.
My name is Tracey Sullivan, and most of my friends call me Trey. The way that I show up in the world first is probably a very tall Black woman, and I'm visually impaired. So people tend to notice that. My background is I'm retired from the corporate world. I worked in the legal field in underwriting and technology. And I'm relatively new to the Atlanta area, so I'm just kind of spreading my wings.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being a part of our podcast today.
Thank you.
We are recording this on Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, and I was very intentional about that and glad you could be here for that because I think this day is an opportunity for us to do our work in the world. I'm especially excited that we could do this today because I feel like what we're going to talk about in terms of disability at the intersections is very important.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your disability.
Well, as I said, I'm visually impaired, and when I think of how I show up in the world, that's what they see. But I also have a hidden disability, and visual impairment is sort of foggy for a lot of people. So many times they're trying their best to figure out what this white cane means, or I had a guide dog and they try to figure out what all of that meant for me to have those things, but then they never really see the true me, which is someone who has lost their left heel in an accident, and I was hurt tremendously in the accident, so I have a limp. But most people don't notice that a hidden disability can change your life as well and shape your day.
Have you been visually impaired since childhood?
No. As a matter of fact, I just recently, about 7 years ago, I lost my vision to the point of being legally blind. Mm-hmm. I found out maybe 10 to 12 years ago that I would lose my vision to the same eye disease that my mother had, a brother and two sisters. So it's genetic, and it's called retinitis pigmentosa. Mm-hmm. And the more I tell people that it's rare, the more I realize it doesn't seem so rare that I found so many people. As a matter of fact, every year I go to a social with other people around the country, actually around the world, who have retinitis pigmentosa. And we share our stories about our families and things. So it really is enlightening to see that there are other people who are functioning as blind people and they're able to be open with it. Because as I said, I was raised by a blind mother and I did not realize she was blind because of her legacy of racism, Jim Crow, having to pick cotton at the age of 6. She had to learn how to make herself useful. Mm-hmm. And so she never stopped, and she never was able to tell people that she was blind because for many people, blindness means being incapable and useless. Mm-hmm. That's kind of my background of how I had to navigate those same roads, with realizing that the way that she taught me was helping me later in life. Mm-hmm. As now I'm 50 years old and dealing with that at 42, 43 years old. It's a difference. When
you became initially aware of your having RP and coming to know your mother as a woman who also had vision loss due to that, did your mother provide information for you that helped you adjust to this new way of being in the world? Or how did she be in conversation with you about the RP?
It's an odd situation because when I told her that the doctor said, I have this retinitis pigmentosa, she just burst into tears. And then it made me think about old conversations where she would come back from the doctor and she'd be a little upset from the eye doctor, and we'd ask her about it and she'd say, oh, it's something I can't even pronounce. And she would fall back on the idea that, I don't speak as well as my children. And that wasn't really true. She did not want us to have a crutch thinking that I can't achieve because I'm going to lose my vision. So she never told us that it was a possibility. So I started driving for my mom when I was 14. And everything that she did, she showed me how to live as a blind woman without me realizing it. So most of our conversation was about her guilt. Once she was, because by the time it happened to me, she was, about 70 years old. And she talked about her guilt in giving it to me. And I just had to grasp her hands and tell her, look, Mom, I have your beautiful brown eyes. And that's the package that it comes in. I am happy to be as I am. I really am. And people are really astonished when they hear that. The only thing I would change is being able to drive. I would love to be able to drive, but vision loss is not a death sentence. It's a rebirth for me.
Did I hear you correctly? And you're saying that your brothers and sisters also have RP?
Yes. One brother had RP, and he passed away many years ago. And then I have two sisters who have RP. So it's very dominant and from my mother's side.
How are they living their lives now in terms of, moving on and living with vision loss?
What's interesting when you have progressive vision loss, and I'm not sure if I said that before, it's a very slow progression of vision loss. And both of my sisters are very much in denial about what's happening to them. They think that if they buy, a car with all these parking assist things and all of that it's going to help them. They continue to drive. And it's very dangerous to do that, because what RP does is take away first your night vision. And then it takes away slowly your peripheral vision. So you're able to see in the center, and the brain is so magnificent. It compensates so well for what you have already seen or what you expect to see. It still plays that picture for you. So let's say I'm in the grocery store. I'm in aisle 14 and everything is clear. My brain takes that picture. In seconds, there's a baby stroller in front of me. Somebody dropped a jar of pickles, and there's pickle juice all over the place. Things change in milliseconds.
Yes.
But my brain will still remember that aisle is clear because I have so many blind spots within my vision. So when people say, oh yeah, you have some vision, it almost means as if you need glasses. I've even had people say, have you tried LASIK and all that? What happens is the retina, which is in the back of your eye, has deteriorated, and the cells are dying, so that you rely on old memories of those things, and it's not just the center that you're seeing. Normal vision is 180 degrees. So you're seeing, down at your feet. Even when you're looking straight ahead, you're able to see so far 180 degrees. My vision is 5 to 10 degrees. So kind of the joke that we talk about with RP is that, we can see a pin across the room, but we'll trip over an elephant on our way to it, which makes it very dangerous to have the things that are closest to you. Those are the things you don't see.
And, I think I'm also excited to have you on the show because you are such a part of my tribe. The lesbian piece, the black piece, the black woman piece, the blind piece. And you get things, and I don't have to tell you, I don't explain it to you because you understand.
Right.
I think it's also interesting in terms of talking about blindness and how people see, because as you talk about how you see, I tell people that peripherally, I have no vision in the left eye, but in the right eye, peripherally, I can get a sense of what's going on. And when I'm looking straight on, though, because I have a central scotoma, I can't see it's my central vision that's blurred.
Right.
So everything's grayed out there. So I may not see the person in front of me doing something, but I can see the person on the side of me telling the person in front of me, that's a blind woman, you need to take care of her.
Right.
And they make the assumption that I can't see.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole lot of things people do that I can see. They're like, oh, or they don't know that I know that they're doing that.
Oh, yeah. I experience that.
Yes.
All the time.
Yes. And people don't just, like I said, have a sense of what those differences are. Of all individuals who are blind, 80% of us see something.
Yes.
Only 10% have no sense of vision whatsoever. And then the remaining 10% has light perception. They can see kind of gross or big shapes and objects and things like that. So oftentimes the stereotypes that people have are so out of balance with reality.
Oh, yes.
Tell me, what are some of the things that you have encountered on a day-to-day basis that are pretty typical in terms of how people have stereotypes about people who are blind?
Well, people tend to limit you. Most of the stereotypes are very, very negative, which is why it's bothersome for me. It's very limiting. They'll tend to think that you're less educated, that there's someone who must be taking care of you. They'll think that you're that you can't take care of yourself financially as well as physically, and that you don't have the ability to be an autonomous individual and have your own ideas and feelings about things, that someone else needs to tell you those things. So really it almost turns you into a child in the eyes of the general public. And they'll try to, and you know, I really want to stress this. Everyone needs help from time to time. You know, as a blind woman, I hold the door for people who are carrying packages. But, you know, if you ask a person if they need help, that's great. They'll take the help or they'll say no. But I've had people who are very upset because I don't take the help. And I've had people who try to encourage me to finish high school or whatever. And I have a law degree. So those stereotypes that they have set in their head that limit you or have a limiting effect on their perception of you, they have a hard time of letting it go. And when you're independent and strong enough to let them know, hey, this is who I am. Sometimes people are upset by you sort of spreading your wings and saying, you know, I'm an important person just like everyone else.
I want to go back for a minute because you talked about blindness as not, or your visual impairment, as not being a death sentence, but it was a rebirth for you. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, the biggest example of that is that I had so many things I was afraid to do because I'd already I was hit by a semi and I broke my neck. I was impaled through my small intestines, broke several bones in my lower back, and my left foot was broken off. So it took me 10 years to recover from that accident and the head injury. And so I was afraid. I used to ride horses before, and I wouldn't do that. And before I was afraid to ski. I belonged to a black ski club in Minnesota, and I would go tubing, but I would not ski. And when I say it's a rebirth, it's because I've lost my fear of things. Because like many people who are sighted, at one time my greatest fear was losing my vision. And now I've had that greatest fear happen to me, and it is not the end of the world. I'm reborn. Now, you know, when you're young, you learn to turn off all your other senses, not completely off, but you mute them so much. And then when you need them, when you lose your vision, then they come to the forefront. And I start to notice things about people and circumstances. So now I can ski. I do powerboat driving, all with sighted guide, but I'm not afraid of so many things. So that's what I mean about that rebirth at middle age, being able to do things that you were afraid to do when you're in your 20s. It's a good feeling, really.
It's fascinating because I think that for individuals who do have some vision loss or who have experienced that, who tend to be in denial mode, it really hinders them from stepping into some pretty amazing spaces in life.
Absolutely.
And having done work in career development with individuals who are blind or visually impaired, I know the type. The person who says, they either say, oh, God's going to heal me, so I don't need any rehab. So they don't do any work in the meantime to help them get to where they need to go next.
Right.
Or it's somebody who just says, you know, life is over. I can't do anything else. And then I'm excited by people like you who say, wow, you know, this is a new opportunity for me to see the world in a different way.
Yeah. And I really don't want to make this into some magnificent thing about me. What really happened was the first thing I did was sat on my bed for 3 weeks and cried. And when I decided, okay, I'm going to live my life, I put on a blindfold because I thought that would totally immerse me into blindness, and I could not even get to my mailbox. Foregoing treatment because I wanted to hold on to my driver's license. That's how silly it can be. But at the same time, it's a process. When you know, as we age, it's a normal process of losing some degree of vision anyway. You have to accept what your limitations are because, this is wild, but I can't tell you how many times I've had drivers who've told me, I'm just as blind as you are. And that's not funny to us who are visually impaired and relying on you driving, but they will intimate that they can't drive at night or they're having problems with peripheral vision. And that's a denial for people who are sighted and who can have corrective measures, but maybe are a little too embarrassed to do that.
Like we said earlier, vision loss is a journey at whatever stage you experience it in life. And I remember I was 33 when I had a profound loss of vision. And for the first 2 months, I couldn't see. After things were diagnosed and I had some other stuff, and about a month later after all that stuff, I went to a period where 2 months after that, I couldn't see anything. It was like total darkness. Wow. I couldn't see if the light was on. And I remember coming out of that to a place where I was able to identify color again and see, large things. But I was sitting in my apartment because I was living by myself at the time. I was sitting in my apartment and I wanted to get my nails done. This was at the time when I was getting nails done. Yeah. And I went to the edge of the apartment complex. I was able to make it down there. And I told myself, you can either cross the street and maybe get to the other side and walk to the nail shop, or you're going to cross the street and get hit. Because at that time, I had severe blind spots. And so I could only see like maybe 50 feet in front of me.
Oh, wow.
And so things would emerge out of the gray, just emerge out of the gray.
Yes.
And I remember saying, you need to go home. And I went home, I sat on my couch and I cried. And so I tell people it is a journey, but our ability to really accept that this is happening makes a huge difference.
Yes, absolutely. It took me a while to get to that point, and it takes everyone a while. I mean, just imagine if you lost a limb, or even people who, when they lose their job, that's part of their identity. When you lose that and have to make a change, you have to sit with that for a moment and see what that's going to mean for you today and in your future. And blindness is definitely a profound thing that you have to sit with for a minute, and then you get your bearings. And that's why it's key to be around other people who have experienced those things, so that you realize that it is not the thing that you see right now in your life is not going to be the same thing you see in your life next year and the year after that. You'll have different experiences that will lead you through it.
Speaking of nails and nail polish and girly things, before we started the interview, we had a really wonderful talk about lesbian identity and representation and just the way in which we show up in the world. And how for those of us who are lesbians who may have a little bit more masculine energy that's apparent to some people than others, that's even another part of the equation if you're visually impaired.
Yes. That
you have to navigate. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that just in terms of your lesbian identity and how you identify in the world and what all that looks like as it relates to you being a woman who's visually impaired.
I am what I consider to be a soft stud. And most people will look at me and say, oh, you dress in all men's clothing. You wear a very short haircut, no makeup, no nails, that type of thing. And that you should be this or you should be that. And I'm going to characterize you as that. I'm comfortable with how people feel about me and that being different from what I am. But as I said at the beginning, I've been so used to hearing Tracey or Trey. And Trey was kind of forced on me when I was young. I hated for anybody to shorten my name. And now that I've embraced being called Trey, now people say, well, that's a guy's name. And when I was a girl, still wearing dresses and, all of that stuff, people were forcing it on me. So that's why it's more comfortable for me to be fluid about who I am, because the outerwear is how I'm comfortable on the outside, but the inside is very, very soft and feminine. I was just joking about it with you earlier. I am really that 50% on the outside is all my father's doing, and the inside is my mother's doing. And thank God the inside is more important, because my mother was very, very sweet and gave me a lot of tools. I can't thank her enough. And she certainly gave me my voice and my eyes. So I'm very grateful for that. When it comes to blindness, that's one more thing that people will focus on. Many people think that I'm trans. I am not. But, I don't shy away from that identification. I explain it and then we go on. But sometimes people are trying to embarrass me. I know that they're trying to embarrass me. Like the bathroom thing. It's still going on. And I use a white cane, and I'll be traveling to the bathroom, and I can kind of tell when I'm at the ladies' room. And once I get there, I check the door. I put my fingers on I don't read Braille, but I can feel the letters. And I go inside, and that's when I'll hear someone say, "You're going to the wrong restroom." I used to turn around and address it. Now, my whole mindset is that this person must be talking to someone else. I know it sounds weird, but that's how I have to keep myself focused on me that day. Because what people don't understand is with being blind or being gay or anything else, you're being you. And at that moment, it might be a teachable moment. You might spend the time to say, "Oh, no, I have it. I understand where I'm at. Thank you." And with hearing my voice, they'll definitely pull back some. But there are days when I just went to the doctor and he told me something I didn't want to hear. I just found out that something bad has happened. I have a late payment on something, and I hate getting those things. I have a life just like anyone else, and I don't always want to teach. So I keep my mindset that got to be talking about somebody else, because I know I'm heading into the ladies' room. So I keep going, because when you hesitate, and this has been my experience, when I hesitate, that's when more ire comes and language that I don't want to hear. And really and truly, when we go to the bathroom, all we want to do is pee. That's it. And at my age, if you interrupt that flow, sometimes it can be too uncomfortable. I can't be dealing with your issues. So there's a lot rolled into that package. But
and you're 50.
Yes. I when I turned 50, it was like a switch just changed, and everything in life changed. But it's a good age.
Well, the whole conversation about gender fluidity is very interesting to me as it relates to visual impairment. Because I don't prescribe to any labels, but I know that people sometimes, depending upon how I look, may make the assumption that, oh, today she looks a little butchy, or she's butch or something. And that's not what I claim. And I in my head, I've always said, well, I'm kind of on the fence. If we need to have labels at all, I'm on the fence. But if I fall, I would be falling onto the butch side, but I'm having my MAC lipstick in my hand, and I think it's important for people to feel comfortable with how they represent themselves in the world and how they show up. I love men's shoes. I think they're far more durable than women's shoes. I like the structure. My feet feel more supported. And, when I go into a women's section, first of all, they don't have 12s a lot. But that often means that I'm in male spaces. I don't have to navigate that. And it can be kind of tricky because, first of all, I can't necessarily see exactly how to best pick out what I want. So sometimes I go with a friend and say, "Hey, it's shoe time. Let's go shopping for shoes." Or if I'm going with someone who really thinks I shouldn't be wearing men's shoes, then it's like, well, girl, don't you think maybe we could go to the women's section and you could find... No, I can't. Because like I said, there are no 12s over there. But it's the whole idea of having to have people sometimes assist you with just some very basic functions of choosing what to wear in a store.
Oh, yes, I hear you. And that's part of the blindness issue with having to have someone to drive you there. And then they're there with you, and they'll do it not only with shoes, but groceries. You know, you have green pepper. Why are you buying red? Mm-hmm. I've been shopping for many years. I really don't need that kind of assistance. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, the gender thing is really, really tough to navigate when you're with somebody else and they're trying to get you on the other side of things. I started, and this is really the God's honest truth. My siblings would be looking at the JCPenney or the Sears catalog at Christmas, you know, trying to line up their toys and stuff. And I would be in the men's section, and I would be thinking about how I was going to dress when I got big. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, as I got a little bit older, I was still doing it, but it transferred into how I was going to dress my husband or my sons. Mm-hmm. But it was always that feeling of, but I would really like to wear that. Mm-hmm. And it was really a comfort issue. It wasn't about the identity of gender. It was how I fit. Yes. And as a tall woman and also a big woman, clothes fit better. Yes. They just do. It's how I feel my most comfortable. Mm-hmm. With wearing, when I was like 10 or 12 years old, I wore a size 10 shoe, and then I moved up to an 11 in women's shoes, and then they were too narrow, and I never liked heels. So what do you do with women who fit into that box, and then they still have to portray this feminine outside that doesn't really fit them? You tear them apart from who they really are if you're successful, but you're not successful with us. Mm-hmm, so I'm just comfortable. I really do. I like you said, the durability, and the style. Mm-hmm. The styles don't fluctuate from year to year so much. So yeah, I've always been comfortable with men's fashion.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited about the fact that now we're really at a time where people see fashion as being unisex.
Yes.
And so to me, that's just very refreshing, because if I want to wear something because it's more comfortable, it's not, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a man's shoe if it's on my foot because I'm not a man.
Right.
You know, it's my shoe. I'm a woman, so therefore it's a woman's shoe.
Yeah.
But I think those are the things that people oftentimes overlook when you think about the intersection of being visually impaired, legally blind, and also wanting to wear what you want to wear in the world and have access to that. And just like have a personal shopper who can go with you and don't give any commentary about, well, that shoe looks way too manly.
Yeah.
Well, but it may feel good. Maybe I want to wear it, you know.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that then helps us kind of move into another area of talking about the intersection of blindness and sexual identity, being in the lesbian community, binding community, and partnership. Mm-hmm. What has that world been like for you?
That has been really, really tough. For a while, it was pretty tough. My initial reaction to vision loss was that I'm never going to have a girlfriend again, because within myself, I felt like other people would not see me as a viable candidate in a relationship. And then within relationships, as I started to date again, it became so difficult with even my partners seeing me the same way as the rest of the world did. And I've always been a huge advocate. Home is supposed to be the safest place in the world. If the entire world is against you, home should be your safe haven. Mm-hmm. And when I come home and have that feeling too of, or the laughter of, I don't think you're really blind. Because I can still cook, and I cook well. My mother cooked well, and all the blind people that I know really well, they cook for themselves, at least to some degree. That it can be so troubling to have that still at home. So dating is tough. When I lost my vision, I was in a long-term relationship, and I was told that my driving was something that was sexy to her. And when I lost that, it was a marked difference in how she was able to perceive me. And I know that sounds trivial, but that does happen. So dating can be tough. The exposure to other people like us, other lesbians and Black lesbians, can be tough to find. And then there's that limitation, but if you are willing to see yourself in a greater space of being a little more into educating other people, you can have that the experience of having yourself honored in a relationship that is healthy for both of you.
I think sometimes people find it very interesting because they think blindness is kind of quirky.
Yeah.
So there's part of it that they find, what is this blind woman like? Who is she? When they first of all find that you're capable.
Yes.
But I clearly have had some situation, even now having a partner, how people will respond to us. And people will sometimes come up to my partner and either address her, and I'm not totally in the equation, but she doesn't go for that at all.
Yeah.
So
good.
She quickly changes that. Or people, when I'm not present, ask her, well, how is it to deal, with the challenges of Angela's blindness? And it's interesting because that's the only way she's known me. She never knew me pre-vision loss. And I think initially that was the struggle I had. I wanted people to know me, know who I was, how accomplished I was, the things that I could do, how quickly I could do things. And now it may take me an hour to do something that I could have done in 20 minutes before with vision. And I think that that's something that other people talk about with vision loss. That same thing, one of the hardest things that I hear people tell me is, it just takes me so long to do things now, even with adaptation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And even after 7 years, I still will say, I can get this done in a half hour. And before I realize it, as I'm doing it, a half hour is passing. I'm like, I really do need to adjust my way of thinking even. So I know it's hard with that. But I can totally relate to you talking about the partner having to almost be your mouthpiece because people won't even talk to you at times. I almost every time I go to a restaurant, the wait staff or the hostess will address whoever I'm with. And sometimes if the person who happens to be near me is Black, they don't even have to be with me. They'll address them and say, would she like, this or that? And, again, that kind of turning me into an infant. But anybody that I choose to date, if they don't catch on to the fact, and after I've told them to, because I don't mind discussing it, but if they don't catch on to the fact that they have to refer to me or have that person talk directly to me, then it's not going to be a relationship that I can continue with because no one else can speak for me. You can't talk about me needing more ice for my drink or anything. Right. And I don't want to be treated that way. I've given up enough in not being able to drive. I don't want to give up any more of my life. And I certainly won't do that in my relationship. So I'm in a great relationship now. And I really enjoy that kind of respect and honor for who I am totally, having vision loss and being a person who is outspoken for the rights of all people with disabilities.
Having opportunities to be in community with other blind people is very important.
Absolutely.
What is your blind community like here in Atlanta? I know you're new to it. Have you been able to find your tribe here?
Well, that's been a little more difficult because I live so far out. So I haven't connected on a regular basis with other blind people face to face. We talk more on Facebook and texting and things. But I would like to spend more time with people locally. But I do spend a lot of time traveling to see friends in networking groups for blind people. I've gotten closer to people who live in Texas and in Canada and things than I have in the Atlanta area. So, that's something I should probably really start to work on as I travel more. Lyft and Uber has been, a huge thing that has opened up to me just recently because it wasn't even in the county that I live in. For the longest. So in the last year, I've been able to travel more into Atlanta. So I hope to grow that family. Yeah, because you're right. It's extremely important to have people who are like you, whether it's your race or your religion. It's got to be where you have some people who really understand without you having to explain.
Yes. And I think that's why the ZAMI NOBLA Facebook group is so important because it is another space for us to do that. And it's always great to see your comments because you're always so darn on spot with things and just so full of wisdom and intellect around some things that I know your presence there is very important. So
thank you. And I really enjoy that outlet for me because, it's all of us having our experiences and speaking on those things. And oftentimes one sharing can help a dozen other people in the same type of struggle. So I appreciate having that kind of forum.
I want us to give people who may not be familiar with individuals with vision loss some sense of what our life is like and how we have certain tools that are very helpful for us. So tell me, what are your top 2 to 3 assistive technology tools that you use every day and how they make a difference in your life?
Okay. Probably the first and foremost is mobility and my cane, or I had a guide dog. I just retired him recently. So being able to get around the world outside of my home, that's number one. Second, I talk to my mom, spiritually all the time. And I tell her, Mom, this is the best time to be blind, because technology is so wonderful. Yes. My first piece of technology was an iPhone. And at times people will say, but you use an iPhone, being blind, as if blind people aren't supposed to use a phone or a smartphone. Right. But it's actually the greatest tool that I've seen to get me to where I need to be, with all the different apps that are already built into the iPhone. And you're able to add on to apps so that when I'm getting dressed, I check the colors now. It might not be exactly the colors that my girlfriend wants me to wear, but at least I know I'm somewhere close on the spectrum for the colors I choose. Getting me to the places I need to get to with GPS, and being able to read my mail. That was the biggest thing, was being able to read my own mail. Not many people know this about me, but I went through identity theft, which is still affecting me today. And it was because someone close to me, and this is how it usually happens. It's not necessarily the Russians or someone who have taken your identity. It's usually when you lose your vision or disabled in some way. Family members and friends who you trust to take care of your business because you don't see, they can often, it doesn't happen all the time, but they can often take away, thinking that because you're disabled, they've minimized you into this person who doesn't need your money or need your credit. And you do, just like they do. But they take advantage of it. And that happened to me, and stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. Wow. So, and it's something that at first I felt a lot of guilt about. Like, I'm well educated. This has nothing to do with that. When you've lost your vision, because with my vision loss, it's peripheral. But when I first had it, I had what's called Charles Bonnet syndrome. And some of us who lose our vision late in life will have this sort of a hallucination of vision, where we see things that really aren't there. So there's this object, an inanimate object that's blocking your view. And at the same time, it's messing with your mind and thinking, hey, you're kind of going crazy. After a while, it goes away. For me, I used to see a monkey. And I also had complete blackout vision, so that I saw nothing. So my partner took advantage of that. And so it's really important to be able to read your own mail. Anything that has your social security number on it, you have to be able to file it so that you can find it again. And that's what technology can do for you. So that's the second thing. All of the technology with the iPhone and things that can be attached to that. I use a scanner. I have a flatbed one, and I also have one that many people use, a Fujitsu scanner, and it scans with OCR, so text to speech. It reads everything that's on my letters, and I do a daily scan of things that come in, and that way, with my limited vision, I can blow it up on my computer, and it also tells me what's there in the boxes. So I guess that would be sort of the number 3, but what I talk about more than anything is all my kitchen gadgets, because I make candy and things, my thermometers that are very large, and they also beep for me. So I depend on my hearing a lot. But at the same time, I am experiencing hearing loss. So I'm at mild to moderate hearing loss. So I have to adjust myself again at 50. That's what happens. You have to readjust. So, I still hear well. I don't use hearing aids now. But I think about that. When I talk to people, I do ask them to repeat themselves a couple more times. But we get through life. And when I get to the point where I need the hearing aids, I will do that.
technology has changed things. I remember 15 years ago, the Canopy reader. I don't think it was even the Canopy reader. Maybe it's been the Canopy reader. Anyway, it was just the size of a shoebox.
Yeah.
And now it's an app on the phone.
Yes.
So people don't realize just what a difference that makes.
Yeah.
And what I've discovered a lot of times when I show my technology to people or they see how I do things, they want it.
Yeah. Yes. Many sighted people want the things that we're using now.
Yes.
And there are some things that weren't really designed for us, but we're able to use. And then there's certain things that are specifically designed for people with vision loss and people who are sighted use. And that's how life should be in this world.
Yes.
It shouldn't be where things are designed and then we're going to carve out space for disabled people.
This is a fascinating conversation, and I hope that it will help dispel a lot of myths that people have around blindness. Sometimes people think, "Oh, Angela, you must have really great hearing now." And I'm like, well, I don't have super sight. I don't have super hearing, super senses. Things are more keen now because they need to be, but I've always had good sense of smell. Yeah. My hearing's always been pretty good. Now I just pay more attention to things.
Yes.
And so I think having an opportunity to be in conversation with people with disabilities can help remove a lot of those stereotypes that people may have about us.
Absolutely. We need to keep our voice, keep talking about things, and we also need to have people who are without disabilities to be receptive, because there are times when, they're trying their best to tell me what it's like to be blind. And if you have never had that experience, you cannot tell someone else what it's like. I don't care how many books and how many degrees you have on helping blind people. You cannot do that. You have to be receptive.
And I think people, and you said this earlier before we began the conversation, people will tell you, you don't look blind. And you want to say, well, what the heck does blindness look like?
Yes.
And then they mean a cane, dark sunglasses, someone who's clumsy.
Yes.
So a lot of times people are not able to really understand just the whole gift of something like Vogue Rehab. I tell people, if I can't walk down the street with a cane, even if I have on sleep shades, then that's a waste of $40,000 spent with my being educated at a blindness training institute in Minnesota. Because for me, that training was under sleep shades, where I had to totally wear sleep shades. The methodology was you had to be totally blind. And so I operated power tools, I cooked. I did a whole host of things. And it just gave me the confidence and the ability to move in the world very differently.
Yes.
And so when people say you don't look blind, that really is a real limiting statement. So I hope after people listen to this, if they've said that, they don't say that again.
I hope not, because I tend to take it as being they think they're either complimenting you because they think blindness is a horrible thing, and if you don't look the part, then you're looking a lot better, or they're saying that you're somehow, for some reason, you're faking it. And I have to tell them, first, there's no upside to being without any sense that you have, especially blindness. And second, what does it have to do with your feeling about me? Has nothing to do with what's real for me. So there's no reason for you to tell me that I don't look a certain way, and it's all encapsulated in something that is negative about what you think blindness is. But blindness is not a negativity. And that's very key, that people understand. It's not something that's negative. So to say, I've talked to people on the phone before, and then when I met them in person, this was years ago, then they would say, I didn't know that you were black. But I am. And it's the same way with blindness. They'll say to me, you don't look like you're blind, but I am. So where are we with this conversation? Let's just move forward. You know that I am, and have a mutual respect. And that way we get something positive done. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. Have we left anything out? Oh, I think we've covered just about anything. I think I've talked way too much, but I've really enjoyed talking with you about it, because it's so important. It's losing vision from one end of the spectrum to the other, legal blindness being at 2200 is it the setting usually, or having a visual field less than 20 degrees, that can happen to a lot of people who don't even realize they have vision loss.
Right.
And in order to accept who you are, especially as we age, you have to know who you are and the limitations that you have. So an open conversation about this is wonderful. We still have it. We still have the goods, even with vision loss.
Yeah.
It's not a horrible thing.
No.
It's actually something that, I wish you could see me smiling, because I am really at the point, 7 years into this, I'm at the point that I love who I am now.
I think we've covered it.
I think so. I really enjoyed it.
This has been great. And as I tell all of my guests, it's been a pleasure having you, and thank you for being part of our Black lesbian history and a part of my tribe.
Angela, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
What a great conversation with Trey Sullivan as we talked about disability at the intersections of sexual identity, gender, and race. Thank you for your candid comments and just for always showing up as who you are, Trey. Thank you so much. If you have enjoyed our podcast episode today, then I invite you to leave comments or feedback wherever you listen to the podcast, or you may email them directly to me at podcast@ZAMINOBLA.org. As always, thanks for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you next month. Have a sweet one. Hey.